Hello everyone, we're back with round 3 of the Olympiad, focusing on the Lebanese team's games. And yeah, this was a very exciting round actually, and quite nerve-wracking as well, similar to the Norway round. So you already here see the result. Yeah, this was quite a topsy-turvy game, except not much topsy-turvy. So yeah, we were facing off against Kazakhstan, a very strong chess country with a ton of strong players. Actually here their average rating I think was 2450 or something. They had I believe 2 IMs and 2 GMs, and Giorgio Kaloust was facing off against Jumabayev, Rinat, yeah, Jumabayev, Jumbo on I think on chess.com, and yeah, I forgot what his lead chess account was. Super strong player, very well known. So yeah, let's see how Gio was going to play against this big player. So is 650 plus rating point difference. So let's see how this went on. So knight f3, knight f6, g3, and counteracting the fianchetto with another fianchetto. Now I myself play b5 against g3, but as you guys, if you've watched my blitz games, you know it hasn't been working well in the past. So yeah, I like this system. Just counteracting the fianchetto and getting like a Queen's Indian formation. And here white delays d4 by quite a bit, so it's not really a Queen's Indian proper. But now after d5 they finally play d4, and it turns out it's a bad move. Actually giving black a slight advantage. Believe it or not, here d4 gives black a slight advantage. Better was c takes d5, and after knight takes, e takes, now you can play d4 safely. And yeah, probably black's bishop is a bit worse than white's bishop. It's a bit awkward to develop this knight. The c pawn, like this f pawn is fine being here, but the c pawn being here, if you play knight c6, it's not so happy. It'd rather be on c5, and c5 comes with its own problems, saddling black with these hanging pawns, which are not so desirable usually, especially in this formation. So here c takes d5 would have given white a slight advantage. Instead, d4 was played, and yeah, the big move here is just taking. And this might seem very counterintuitive because usually the pawn is just lost after queen a4, and here it is lost, but the point is that you gain a lot of activity, and we'll see how in this concrete variation. So queen a4, so you play a6 here, trying to go for b5 and cement the pawn, forcing white to take the pawn, and now you go b5 anyway. I think I said b6, yeah, I meant b5. b5, queen d3, and now c5, opening up for this bishop and opening up for this possibility and this possibility. And now we've solved the problem I mentioned about the c pawn being bad on c7 because it's backward. Now we don't have that problem, and black is getting a lot of activity. Note that, for example, white's dark squared bishop hasn't been developed even, so black should have a small advantage here. Surprising Jumabayev went for this d4 idea. Now Gio didn't find the best move and played c5, which is reasonable, just gaining space and, well, gaining some symmetry. But yeah, that d takes c4 was better. Here Jumabayev could have played c takes d5, and after e takes, again retained the small advantage thanks to always this possibility and this bishop being slightly worse. Or after knight takes d5, again they could have played like e4, he could have played e4 and also gotten an advantage that way. However, he played d takes c5 first, which isn't so accurate, and the reason is not what Gio played, which is the very natural bishop takes c5, which I labeled as an interesting move, but perhaps it's a dubious one. The better alternative here was d takes c4, winning back the pawn and threatening now to take. And if takes here occurs, which is the natural move, now you can take like this, opening up for your rook, and that's very advantageous. Queen takes, rook takes, and black should have zero problems here. In fact, they might even be slightly better. So again, Gio had I know I said that here white is slightly better, but if you look at this position, I mean, wouldn't you love being black here against the 2600? Well, love is a strong word, but you wouldn't mind getting this position against the 2600. So yeah, Jumabayev gave white 2 chances here to get small advantage. Well, the second maybe isn't, but yeah, unfortunately Gio missed these. But still, it wasn't so bad. After bishop takes c5, he had an acceptable position. C takes, knight takes, and now knight g5. White still has a small advantage, but their advantage would have been even bigger had they found bishop g5, forcing the queen onto an awkward square. You don't really want to play this, and yeah, you have to go like queen c8 or queen e8. Queen e8 I think is the better move, but yeah, it's not so desirable. Queen c8 probably runs into this kind of trickery, so you want to go queen e8. And yeah, queen e8 isn't so desirable. You're blocking in your rook, and yeah, what's the queen doing there? So that gives white a slight advantage. Instead, he went knight g5. And now, as you can see here, these moves weren't analyzed because, wow, both sides were playing so well. Of course, there were some alternatives at some points, but no, actually, yeah, overall, these moves were quite good. So let's take a look at them. All very natural. Kicking away the knight, developing your knight here to a6, and here some liquidation occurs. Takes, 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 takes. Again, let's view it slowly. Takes, 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 takes. And knight f4 attacking the pawn. Seems very reasonable, but the pawn is defended, and the pawn is attacked again, and it's defended after knight c7. The pawn is pushed to h4, gaining some space on the king side. The rook comes to d7, aiming to double up and defend the pawn. The king comes to f1, getting the king in the endgame. Rook a d8, defending as was planned. Bishop d2 developing, knight e6, trying to kick away the knight. The knight comes to d3 where it attacks the bishop. Gio decides to keep the bishop, which is very good. And yeah, here after rook ac1, g5 was a possibility, trying to gain space on the king side, but Gio didn't play that. He played knight c5, which is also fine, but after knight b4 here he kind of blundered. He had bishop e5 attacking the b2 pawn and potentially insinuating some d4 ideas. Instead he played knight e4, simply allowing knight c6, which is rather annoying. And we'll see the game continuation after rook e8. Jumabayev found bishop e1, and yeah, now it's a very nagging advantage against this weak d pawn, and it's difficult to see how black can will eternally hold on to the pawn. But still, the position is probably closer to a draw than a win, simply because black has enough defensive resources. But white is doing well, gaining space on the queen side and king side by pushing their pawns, relocating the bishop to c3 where it attacks some important squares. And now after knight c7, which wasn't the best move, maybe king h7 was even better. Simply getting out of the line of fire after any rook c8, and yeah, just a kind of high class waiting move. Instead, knight c7 allows the game continuation, which is bishop g3, attacking the knight. So the knight, so the rook was played here because if the knight moves anywhere, I mean there are several moves. Okay, so let's say here maybe a4 can come at any moment, and if you go here probably rook c8. So yeah, it wasn't so desirable for Gio to move the knight, so instead he tried to defend, but now he just loses a pawn. Now maybe he analyzed that this endgame is drawn, and after king f8, maybe he wasn't too wrong. I mean, these pawns are hella scary, but in the end it's 4 against 3, so one extra pawn on the same side. And yeah, probably white is winning, but black has some defensive chances. Instead, Gio went for activity with rook c2, but yeah, this turns out it's completely losing because after check and a3, there is no good way to protect here. So Gio tried to win the pawn, but after rook d7, turns out that if you take here, I can take here, which is what happened in the game. And yeah, these two pawns are going to be frozen by this one pawn, and black is simply lost. So let's see the technique. So pushing the pawns, remember what I talked about, b5, it simply locks in these two pawns. This is a chess pattern everyone should know about. It's called I think the freeze by Silman, pawn freeze. So 1 pawn freezing 2 pawns. Yeah, here going for a mate threat. Rooks don't move that way. Mate threat here. Yeah, and it's completely lost. We'll go ahead, but yeah, this is just simply lost. So very nice game by Gio. He was completely like, he had a dead draw against Rinat Jumabayev, an insanely strong player. Unfortunately, it was not meant to be for us. Next up is a game between Amr against Suleymenov. Alisher. Yeah, and this game, whoa. I mean, Faisal got a huge advantage against the 2600, and here Amr got a huge advantage against the 2400. And again, it's one of these b3 systems. If you guys remember, in round 1, Faisal played a b3 system against the 2600 Christensen. So b6. This is an interesting move here after b3, but why not just play normally with like knight c6 or knight f6? Knight f6 maybe runs into e5, which is the idea of this b3 setup. But yeah, just knight c6 usually is completely fine here. You can, yeah, I believe I need, yeah. Here you play a6 first. Is it from this move order or without knight f3 inserted? Yeah, I believe here, yeah. Okay, you can play it without knight f3 inserted, but here as well you can play a6. The point being to prevent any bishop b5. Or you can play actually knight c6 immediately, and after bishop b2 you play a6 preventing bishop b5. Yeah, that's the way, yeah. Okay, so b6, d4. Very normal move, this d4, but maybe when, like, maybe delay it a bit because you're playing this b2 setup, so knight c3, then play bishop b2, d4, and get the knight out and enjoy this long diagonal. Okay, d4 is fine. C takes, knight takes. Amr probably didn't want to close in on this bishop, so he didn't want to move the knight to c3. Principled play. Bishop b7 attacking this weak e4 pawn, and bishop d3 defending. Knight d2 was probably a better way to defend. This doesn't block in the dark squared bishop, as you have bishop b2 now. And yeah, white should have a small advantage here. Bishop d3 is reasonable. And now Suleymenov played d6, which isn't so accurate because it basically locks in the bishop. Doesn't make sense. Just bishop c5, get some activity, get some strong bishops, and yeah, white should be better still, but not so much. After d6, white is of course now gaining a big advantage because the bishop, I mean, just has one square to go to. Amr played bishop b2. Very natural move, but perhaps here c4, gaining a Maroczy-like structure, preventing d5 is important here. It doesn't work because it's really early now in the opening. And yeah, so playing this kind of structure, preventing d5, and being able to actually maybe even knight d2, bishop b2 is even better, just so that the bishop is not blocked in by the knight. So yeah, this was also quite a promising line. Okay, Amr played bishop b2, which is fine. Knight f6 attacking the pawn, knight d2 defending. Now he finds the right setup. a6, preventing any knight b5, bishop b5 nasties, which is of course reasonable. And now Amr goes for queen e2. Of course very natural, aiming to perhaps castle long or castle short, not revealing white's options right away. But yeah, perhaps here f4 gaining space was even better, intending at some point e5, f5, or at some point e5. So perhaps the space gaining aggressive move was better. But okay, queen e2 is reasonable. And now knight b d7. Yeah, a bit dubious. Because you have a way to concretely win something here. Well, not win, but gain a small advantage, or at least rectify your earlier mistakes, improve your position a bit. So knight b d7 is a standard developing move, but yeah, it's not so strong. More incisive was e5, and now after the knight is forced to move to f5, of course f3 is a bit passive. So knight f5, you get g6, knight e3, and bishop g7. and you've gained the tempo here to develop. You've developed quickly. Now your bishop makes some sense because it's controlling the d4 square with an x-ray. Here it made no sense, just defending well, it's defending d6, but yeah, that's the extent of its job. So yeah, this was also a good try, which Suleymenov missed. He played knight b d7, f4, and now Amr went for Suleymenov went for e5. A bit mistimed, as I mentioned earlier. E5 was better. And yeah, Amr found f4 now. He should have played it maybe a move sooner, but it's fine. Knight c5 was a very natural and good way, just a good way to proceed, because it's attacking e4 and threatening to win the light squared bishop, which maybe, I mean, the light squared bishop isn't so important in this position, but at the end it's a bishop, so quite important. And yeah, knight c5 made much more sense, relocating the knight as such. e5 instead allowed knight e3, knight 4 f3, and now e takes f4. It shows that the entire concept of Suleymenov in the opening was completely lackluster and very nonchalant, actually, because now your king is in the center and d5 is coming and the queen is lined up. So that's the big issue with Suleymenov's position, and Amr is well aware of that, so he castled, preparing e5 and crushing black in the center. So all of this concept by Suleymenov to play e5 and take on f4, trying to win a pawn, not a good idea. Also opening up for the bishop even further to boot. So knight 4 f3, and here Suleymenov should have tried to defend the e5 square with queen c7 and just try to develop like that. But he played e takes f4, which wasn't so accurate, trying to win a pawn. Now castles, and Suleymenov plays knight g4, which is basically losing. I mean, his idea is to control e5 and prevent e5, but it turns out he's actually helping e5 to occur. Instead, he should have tried bishop e7 again with this queen c7 idea, but now there's knight c4 again with this e5 idea, and white should have a big advantage, but black isn't lost. After knight g4 he's lost, because now comes e5, and well, there is no real good way to prevent all of the incoming onslaught. Incoming onslaught. So the pawn seems to be lost here, but there's always knight c4 ideas alongside bishop f5 ideas, and this proves to be too much for white to handle, for black to handle. So just look at this position with the bishops, with the knight, with the rook here. You can imagine it's completely lost. Maybe Amr thought he's losing a pawn here after e5, like takes, and black is safe, but no. It turns out that immediately, actually, nasty stuff is happening, and there's always this bishop f5 idea, always knight c4, so completely win. Instead he played g3. Actually no, Amr definitely saw e5, but he thought g3 e5 was even better, and turns out he was wrong. So f takes, and now e5. Yeah, he thought that perhaps opening up the file and sacrificing one more pawn was better. After knight g takes e5, which is a good move. Now he had bishop f5 again. Okay, so like f takes g3 isn't like, it's not wrong or anything, in the sense that it's not blowing away white's advantage. White is still better, but e5 immediately was just even better because of several concrete variations that I don't really like. If I go into them, they take like 10 minutes or whatever. It's just a general concept anyway. As a human, you'll never see these variations. These are very engine-y variations. Of course, when I analyzed this, I thought g3, I liked g3 e5 instead of e5 personally. I liked it more, but with engine analysis it was proven that g3 was better. I mean, e5 immediately was better. But yeah, it's just general concepts about this file not being it's not necessary to open this file and whatever. Yeah, anyway, and then some variations like losing the pawn becomes a bit problematic, but whatever. So here he should have played bishop f5, Amr, but instead he went rook h e1, which gives black the advantage after bishop e7. Now I can see why Suleymenov didn't want to play this, because after takes, there's this attack here, so he can't really castle because that would lose. But after king f8, black is safe. He has the bishop pair. He has 2 pawns now and perhaps a third. So black should be fine. Of course, not easy to play and easier said than done with the engine, of course. And of course, like bishop f6. Bishop f6 actually is an added benefit for black. But I mean, you'd see all of white's advantages with like knight c4, bishop e4, and like the king being here on f8 permanently stuck. You'd think white is doing okay here. And it's probably a good idea by Suleymenov not to enter into these complications with his lower rated opponent. But yeah, queen e7 just turns out to be a bad move, so he should have played bishop e7, because after knight takes, d takes, now comes knight c4, which perhaps wasn't the best. Perhaps starting with bishop f5 and then going knight c4 was even stronger. That way you kind of dissuade black from castling long, which is what happened in the game, or could have happened at one point, and it did happen eventually, right? Yeah, it did. So perhaps bishop f5 was a more incisive, but knight c4 doesn't spoil anything, or doesn't spoil too much. And now here, because bishop f5 hasn't been played, black can try to castle, and after bishop f5, like go to well, perhaps go to b8, but yeah, at least now you're castled before facing off bishop f5. Instead, he blundered with this check and just giving the king this b1 square, which is desirable for the king, of course. Like, the king wants to go to b4 anyway, to b1 anyway. It's something very natural in these castle queenside positions. Now he castles, and now came bishop e4. Instead, there is a crazy tactic here with knight takes e5. Now bishop e4 is still close to winning, or at least white is much better, but after knight takes e5, white is completely crushing. They're threatening this, and after takes, the key idea here is not to take back, which is probably fine, but playing h4. Fine in the sense that like white is still probably a bit better. But after h4, now the queen has nowhere to go to defend the knight, so it has to go to, let's say, taking, and now you take on e5. The reason you don't really want to take here, I think there are multiple. One is rook e8, the other is potentially f6. There's also potentially rook d5. So actually, let me check with the engine. So if takes, bishop d6. Yeah, rook e8 doesn't really work, right? Yeah, it's bishop d6, with the point being that simply black's pieces are too active. And yeah, here, like, where is your advantage? Your advantage lied in the fact that you had a lot of developed pieces. Now just the bishops are developed. Black is castled here, white is castled here. Pawns are about equal, or will be about equal. So there's no clear-cut path forward to white. Now, of course, the engine likes white a bit more because of the more active rooks and the potential to check here and all of that stuff, but it shouldn't be too much. I wonder if rook e8 doesn't work. Yeah, bishop takes a6, and you have queen c4, and yeah, f6 isn't working. So yeah, that was one line. Let me just input bishop takes e5 as a mistake. White is better. And let's put here bishop d6, and white is better. And rook e8 as a question mark or a blunder. White is winning after bishop takes a6. Okay, so he played bishop e4, which is fine and still gives a big advantage. Bishop c5, finally developing the bishop. The bishop should have been developed to c5 on move 6, but finally on move 19 it's developed there. And here Amr missed the rather simple, actually, takes, and queen g2 check. And here you just have a splendid position. It's a bit strange he didn't find that. And perhaps he saw something better with b4, I'm not sure. Yeah, so here white has potential, for example, to go queen c6. Knight d6 is in the air, knight takes e5 is in the air. You can at some point recover the pawn as well, but mainly the point is queen c6, knight d6 ideas. Instead, Amr went for b4, sacrificing a pawn to go for this sacrifice. And after knight takes b6, king d8. All of this was correct had he found knight takes d7. And here you can see that white still retains a slight advantage here. Or even white is better, meaning see, a bit more than a slight advantage. But unfortunately, Amr blundered with bishop c1, thinking he's well attacking the queen and can take here at any moment. But now comes queen e7, defending here and threatening some big nasties, which is what occurred in the game. So rook f1 was tried. And yeah, it turns out this bishop c3, queen b4 idea is simply too powerful. Amr doesn't get to recover the exchange, and after the exchange isn't recovered, it's all over. King here, queen c2 is coming, and it's GG. So, very unfortunate game. Amr had his opponent, well, he was completely winning at many points in the game, and at many points he was better. Just one single blunder, bishop c1, allowing the queen, this nasty bishop c3, queen b4 stuff. I mean, who would see that? It's not easy at all. So unfortunate, very unfortunate, but yeah, hey. Like, already, like, board 1 could have been a draw, board 2 could have been a win. So already we might have had 1.5, instead we had 0 out of 2. Okay, now let's take a look at this game. Again, actually a disappointing game, you can see from the result. Antoine was drawing this game, but he blundered at the last minute. So we could have already drawn the Kazakhstan team. Not meant to be. Okay, so let's take a look at the game. It was a very interesting Alpin Sicilian, this dragon setup against the Alpin with an early d5, and here you usually develop like this, get the bishop here or to g4, then maybe the knight to f5, all of that good stuff. So here already we see f6, bishop b5, and now knight h6. Bishop d7 is an alternative here, so here bishop d7 is possible, but yeah, knight h6 is fine as well. Castles, e takes, rook e1, queen d6, rook e1 natural, queen d6 natural, improving the position of the pieces. b3 natural, developing here, or actually aiming to play this and skewer. So rook d8 avoids the skewer. Bishop a3 anyway, developing with tempo. Queen c7 going back, but blundering a tactic, which is a bit difficult to see because the tactic is actually a developing move. So actually maybe because it's a developing move it's difficult to see, but no, because it's a developing move you don't think it's a tactic. So so queen c7 was played. Instead knight b4 should have been played, trying to prevent the coming tactic, which we'll talk about. Knight b4 looks a lot strange though. Very strange, because you're getting into the pin, but you always have a5 and white has no real way of making use of this pin. And after a5 you can, for example, go queen b6, attack the bishop and get out of the pin. Instead he went for queen c7, and now there's knight c3, a natural developing move but with a tactical threat. Knight takes, rook takes, bishop c4 is the big tactical threat. So Antoine played an interesting move to try to prevent that. Queen a5, attacking these two pieces and semi-attacking this one, putting pressure on this one. So bishop b2 was played, defending this piece. Instead perhaps queen c1 could have been tried, aiming to put pressure here and simply defend the bishop. But yeah, queen c1 is a bit weird. So bishop b2 and bishop b2 and now a6. Not the most accurate. Perhaps simply, oh god, bishop b2, knight bishop b2, knight f5 was perhaps more accurate. You always have this knight d6 idea, you have this also knight d6, knight e4 idea, you have this knight takes d4 idea, you have knight e7 maybe defending in some cases. So, and of course the knight wasn't doing anything here, so getting it to f5 was much better. Instead Antoine played a6, and this really creates actually some weaknesses. You can see here that after knight a4, knight c5, b6 becomes c5 becomes weak, and if you want to play b6, then you have these rather weak pawns, and you open up the c6 square. This is actually something that happened in the game, so takes, and now knight a4, a good move, bishop d7, and yeah, the knight is very strong on c5. So knight c5, queen c7, defending some squares. The rook comes to a natural square, but one pair of rooks is traded, and now came queen e2. Queen e1 is the engine recommendation, perhaps going for queen a5 ideas later, or bishop c1, bishop c3, queen a5 ideas. But yeah, I mean, queen e2 is much more natural. Knight e6 was an interesting also option that I myself would have definitely played. The point here being that you just win the dark square bishop, which might not seem very relevant now, especially because it's hemmed in, but long term it will definitely seem relevant. So yeah, I just like taking bishops, taking the bishop pair. But yeah, okay, queen e2 is fine. a5 is normal, trying to gain space, and well, the queen was attacking, of course, here, the a6 pawn, so you had to defend it, because the knight also was attacking it. Rook e1 naturally going on the open e file, bishop f7 covering the e6 square, bishop c1 relocating the bishop to come to perhaps f4, knight f5, again we've mentioned this, very natural, g4 kicking away the knight, but not before rook e8 comes, queen f1, and now, for better or worse, Kassis should have, because Kassis is under such pressure, he should have traded off one pair of rooks, played knight d6, and here black shouldn't be too much worse off. This is coming, this is coming, perhaps this is coming, a lot of ideas, and yeah, black shouldn't be too worse off. Instead, knight d6, which is also natural, but yeah, you're just allowing bishop f4, which pins here and is very annoying. So yeah, knight d6 wasn't great because of that. I mean, knight d6 isn't such a bad move, like it's not a bad move at all actually. Rook takes e1 was more accurate though. And now, after bishop f4, queen d8, which turns out to be a blunder, and we'll see why in a second. Here his opponent, Antoine's opponent, whose name I haven't mentioned, Urazayev, Arystanbek. So Arystanbek here played queen a6, which wasn't actually so accurate because of the game continuation. Rook takes e1, knight takes e1. Again, trading off will get the draw closer because white doesn't have enough of an advantage in this endgame. The active pieces don't quite really give white enough to play for a win. But with the rooks, they had chances. So that's why it's important to trade off rooks. So just here, instead of queen a6, which would have probably which did make the game rather drawish. Instead, he should have tried bishop takes d6, because after takes, now there's queen e1. Hitting these two pieces, basically forcing the text move, queen d8, defending these two pieces. But now after check, you move back and a4. And yeah, g5 is coming, h4 is coming, white is simply too active. Black has zero chances in this endgame. Their pieces just can't move. This bishop can't move because the queen is covering g8, and g5 is coming to annoy white with pawn pushes. And yeah, this queen can't ever move because, like, let's say you come here. First of all, you're not attacking this because of this knight. You're not attacking b3. And even if you come to b4, there's always queen takes e8 check. So this is completely losing for black. It might not seem so at first, but if you analyze it a bit, it becomes apparent. Queen a6 here, takes, and now bishop takes d6. A bad idea, because here simply winning a pawn was just better. I don't know why he didn't do that, it's a bit strange. Here knight e4 does offer some chances for black though, trying to draw. And yeah, you have the bishop pair, so you can try to hold on here. Yeah, but he went bishop takes d6. And now what followed is a series of basically good moves by both sides. So let's take a look at them. He took and f5. So all very natural going into this endgame, trading off some pawns, getting the bishop to a good square. And here an interesting sacrifice by Antoine. I thought his idea here was to play c5, which goes into this opposite card bishop endgame, which should be basically a draw. White shouldn't be able to make progress. The king will come in, and they have this possible d pawn. Well, of course, these pawns might be annoying, but they're always stopped by a simple bishop c6, so this should be a draw. Instead, he went for bishop d7. Also interesting. I mean, the point of a4 is just to leave these two pawns as weaknesses and try to target them with the bishop pair. That's kind of what happened. King f3, bishop c8, knight d8, and now here c5 was played. Yeah, so this is attacked, so c5 is natural, but perhaps bishop c3, going for the idea that after here there's this, getting this back, and there's this. Perhaps this was a bit better. Instead, c5, sacrificing a pawn. Well, not really sacrificing, of course. Here you can just recapture and trying to go for a passed pawn yourself. But here there was knight c6, which threatened the fork on e7, picking up the bishop, and threatened bishop b4, trying to pick up the pawn. So yeah, and of course the knight can take on b4 at any moment. So that was a much better move. Instead, he went for bishop d6, and this game now basically becomes a draw. Not much to say, not much to say, not much to say. All of this is fine and reasonable and dandy. And now Antoine blunders with bishop takes f4, seemingly going into an opposite card bishop endgame and getting comfortable that maybe the draw is near. But it turns out that the opposite card bishop endgame isn't offering drawing chances. It's actually completely lost. Here you should have tried king f5, and yes, it might seem that you're losing these pawns, but you always have, for example, after knight takes here, bishop c4, trying to pick up the pawn again. And yeah, with the bishop pair, you might be down 2 pawns, but you have also like an active h pawn, a potential queen if they take here. And if they take here, the knight is very badly sidelined, and you have a lot of options to try to salvage this position. It's not, of course, easy to see how black can draw this, but with the bishop pair and active pieces, active play, you can try it out yourself and see that actually the draw isn't overly difficult. But after bishop takes f4, which is what occurred in the game is simply lost. Let's see what White's technique had to offer. So White simply pushes through with the passed pawns, and the point is that you get a safe passed pawn and potentially win another. Well, you do win another pawn, and White just has too many passed pawns, so the game is completely over. Again, unfortunate, we had a draw, but not meant to be. And now for our 4th game, a game that we had a draw in and perhaps a win, but we lost. So yeah, we got 4-0'd by Kazakhstan, but basically we could have had 2.5. Very unfortunate. 2.5 or maybe even 3. Alright, so let's take a look at this game. Akram again getting to play his favorite Catalan, which he scores so well in and plays so well. You guys might have remembered yesterday's game. And yeah, this setup with bishop b7, trying to basically a Queen's Indian setup, so trying to counteract White's Fianchetto. And this is something Gio played against Jumabayev, so it's funny to see that Akram was facing it. Here knight e5 is probably the best move, just stopping any taking here because of this, and maybe knight c6 is on the agenda. Instead, here Akram played c takes d5, which is reasonable and fine. E takes a3, bishop d6. a3 is nice, but the follow-up before, while it does make sense trying to go bishop b2 and cement the knight here, the bishop isn't really doing so much here. And yeah, before, okay, it stops c5 at some point, but it's like just simply going knight e5 was better. Now Akram might have been afraid actually of c5, so okay, knight e5, c5. So we might have been afraid of that because that really crushes the center, and yeah, it seems that black has a good game, but it turns out that after knight c4, a very nice tactic, the point being you can't really take because of this. Now white should be doing quite well, and this is coming, and yeah, black isn't a happy camper in this position. Instead, b4 was played. Oh god, the mouse is acting up again. So b4 was played, knight b d7, natural developing move, and now queen b3. Perhaps the simple bishop b2, you want to get the bishop here anyway and support knight e5. Perhaps this was better. Instead, queen b3, queen e7, natural, trying to get in c5, and well, the queen doesn't have really many better squares, and attacking e2 as well. Bishop b2, e2 isn't really attacked because of this. Yeah, so rook e1 and bishop f1. So knight e4 here was tried, getting the knight to a strong square supported by this bishop. e3, again, Akram should have put the knight on e5 with the same idea as knight e4, but he wasn't doing that. e3, simple developing move, just cementing the center. And now came b5. A very committal positional move because you're completely giving up the c5 square, which of course turns out to be a bad idea. Now, the point is more so that like he didn't want to play a5 immediately because he feared b5. But it turns out that in this concrete position, b5 isn't so great, because it turns out that in the future this pawn will become weak on b5, and the pawn can be chipped away with c6, and potentially c5 is on the cards if the b pawn thus becomes weak. Instead, Nogerbek played b5. The point here is that after a5 you no longer have b5, but with Akram's queen c2, Nogerbek had another thing coming. He played a5, the most natural move, but now knight b3 was a brilliant move by Akram, going for knight c5, and the point being, if you take here, I simply take back, you take, I take, and now after taking here, which is the most natural move, I just take here, and yeah, this trade obviously favors white. This pawn might seem like a passed pawn and all of that, but it's actually quite a weak pawn. After the queen takes c7, you're attacking the bishop on b7, and your queen becomes active. So it turns out that this entire plan was wrong because of the very nifty knight b3 and the fact that after queen c2 you're attacking c7. So brilliant find and brilliant calculation by Mr. Dr. 1000 IQ. And yeah, just to mention here that knight b6 was the best move in this position. So after rook takes a1, we took a look at bishop takes b4, which is wrong, and simply allows queen takes c7, giving white an advantage. Knight b6 was the better way to play here, going for bishop c8, bishop f5, which is something that happened in the game, but only after knight df6, which kind of gives this superfluous knight scenario. So knight b6, at least you can come to c4, your knight isn't stepping on the other knight's toes. Knight c5, very good move, very natural, but bishop c8 also a good counter punch. Rook a7, natural, getting the queen, getting the rook lined up with the queen and setting up some tactics there, but the rook isn't really doing a whole lot there. Maybe just knight e5 again with the same idea, and like getting these two knights to these strong squares makes a lot of sense and is quite good. So instead rook a7, and now bishop takes c5, a weird positional move, just giving up the bishop and opening up for this bishop. And yeah, of course the pawn here, it will always be a benefit for white, because I mean with the piece there, like the piece is strong on c5, but sometimes it could end up being offside and not doing anything. But with a pawn on c5 you don't really have that problem, you don't care. So instead here just bishop f5 in line with the plan. That was much better and much more obvious. But yeah, he played bishop takes c5, d takes c5, and now knight g4, putting a lot of pressure here. But it turns out that white's position remains good after queen d3. What's the point? You're attacking these two pawns. So if black tries to take, which is probably the best move, you play queen d4 first. You don't take because that doesn't come with tempo or anything. You play queen d4 threatening mate, forcing black to go f6. Of course, knight f6 would drop the knight. And yeah, what else? Queen f6 isn't so desirable because of quite simply, actually queen f6 you can't take, but okay, you're dropping c7. So all of these are bad, so you have to play f6, and after queen takes d5 check, bishop e6, queen c6, rook takes c7 is coming, and yeah, queen takes b5 is also coming. White should be fine here and probably have a small advantage. Instead, he played bishop d4, Akram played bishop d4, which yeah, isn't the greatest idea, because now you're simply allowing knight g takes f2. But still, Akram had a chance with queen a2, attacking d5, again c6 like can't really be played because of the rook here, lined up with the queen. But queen a2, yeah, just attacking the pawn, and maybe even in some cases going here. It made a lot of sense. Knight h3, checking f1, and white should be okay here. Black of course has a slight edge, but shouldn't be much. So knight g takes f2, and here Akram really blundered with knight d2. Well, not really blundered, but blundered with knight d2. Knight h3 check. Knight h3 check, king f1, and now bishop f5. Again, in line with the plan we mentioned earlier, but here actually it turns out that maybe knight takes d2, queen takes d2, queen g5, with queen g6, bishop g4, queen d3 later, queen b1 check ideas. All of that was actually turned out to be much better for black, or at least slightly better. Instead, he didn't find this, Nogerbek, and played bishop f5. But now Akram found the good knight takes e4, takes, liquidating. And yeah, now after, for example, c6, aiming to go for queen takes d3 in some cases, rook takes c7 in some cases, bishop c5 in some cases, queen c5, queen takes b5 in some cases. All of this meant that black white should have a reasonable game here and shouldn't be worse. They might be slightly worse, but not much. Instead, Akram blundered with queen e2, and from here on out, his opponent played engine perfect, basically. Didn't give him a single chance. Knight g5, so here actually white is completely losing, because the knight becomes so active and the queen comes in, and it's a GG. So queen takes b5, trying to recover a pawn, but now queen e6, entering the position with the queen. Akram tries to retreat the pieces to try to save what was left of his positional advantage, but not happening. And yeah, I know I'm going a bit too quickly, but don't want to make this video too long. And it's clear how black has an advantage anyway. If you take a look at this position, for example, yeah, white's king will never find safety, while black's king will always find safety. Of course, there's some pressure on the dark squares, but as long as you don't blunder mate, you're completely fine. So let's go through this. And now queen takes f1. Queen d5 was perhaps quicker because you have queen a2 check and rook c8, rook c2, and yeah, this should be completely winning. But queen takes f1 just enters into a winning endgame with two pawns up. And yeah, actually the game didn't last much longer here. And yeah, so rook g1 at any point is coming, and yeah, the pawns are unstoppable, and also h3 in some cases is hanging. Very disappointing game as well. Actually here not much was occurring, so like c6 was a very natural move there to get the bishop to c5. Yeah, but I guess it wasn't so easy also, the heat of the moment. Yeah, so overall very sad. We were doing so well and all of that, but yeah, we ended up not doing so well. We got 4-0'd while we probably should have 3-0'd them or 2.5'd them, but hey, happens. Yeah, and we'll try to recover in the 4th round, occurring tomorrow. By the way, guys, just wanted to mention that unfortunately Faisal tested positive for COVID, well, for SARS-CoV-2, and he has COVID, and yeah, we wish him the best. these health issues suck. This pandemic still rages on, unfortunately, even though the world has opened up a bit. But yeah, the pandemic's still there. Yeah, very sad. Hope he recovers quickly, and hope the Lebanese national team doesn't suffer from any SARS-CoV-2 or COVID, because then we'd be sent back home, and yeah, it would suck to close off the tournament on this note. So hopefully they can play the remaining rounds. And with that, guys, thank you a lot for watching. Hope you got something out of this video, and tune in for more of these videos on the Olympiad. Alright guys, with that, take care and au revoir.